Welcome to the grammar video notes for subject-verb agreement. Before we get started with the notes, please get your supplies ready. You will need your notebook, you will need a pen or pencil. I recommend anything other than black, otherwise it looks too much like the notes you're about to glue in. And you will need your crayons. If you haven't already, please glue these notes pages into your notebook. They're laid out in the order that you need to glue them in, so please pause the video if you haven't already glued them in. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and grab your yellow crayon, and I want us to start by highlighting our topic. We are focused on subject-verb agreement. I'm just going to highlight that here at the top so it stands out. Subject-verb agreement means that when we use certain verbs, you have to change which verb you use depending on how many subjects you're talking about or who your subject is. If you've ever heard someone say something and it sounded awkward, it might be because they had a subject-verb agreement error. So today we're going to focus on correcting those. The big idea here is that when we are writing in the present tense, meaning you're talking about what somebody is doing right now, we use different verb endings with different numbers of subjects. So we're going to explore what that looks like. To start, I have some examples that are done correctly. So if I look here, I see the horse runs through the field. The horses run through the field. Depending on what subjects I've got, the way I write my verb changes. Go ahead and switch over to your pen or pencil. And I want you to look here at that first sentence. We're going to underline horse and we're going to underline runs. The horse runs through the field. Now with that word horse, that means there is one horse. My subject is singular, one thing. And because my subject is singular, and it's not me or you, it's somebody else or something else, I use the word runs, and I'm going to circle that S on the end. The horse runs through the field. The next sentence tells me the horses run through the field. If it says horses, I know I'm talking about two or more things are doing the action. Since I have two or more things, I don't use the S on runs. It's just the word run. So I've got two sentences. The first one, the horse runs through the field. And in the second sentence, the horses run through the field. Let's look at another example. Our first sentence says, Mrs. Taylor catches the ball. My subject is Mrs. Taylor, and she catches. Mrs. Taylor is one person, and since she is one person, I use that S on the end of my verb. She catches the ball. She's doing that right now. My second sentence says, Mrs. Taylor and Ms. Butler catch the ball. So in this sentence, my subjects are Mrs. Taylor and Ms. Butler. There's two of them. Since I have two or more, like in the case of the horses, I am going to use the word catch. Notice I did not add an S. So I'm going to switch back over to my yellow crayon, and I've got a chart here that has all the different ways to write something. Now the first one, I have my subject I, and I'm using the word walk in all of these examples. For I can just say I walk. It didn't have any change, so I'm going to write that. I'm just going to put an X here. No change. For my next subject, I have the word you, and I would say you walk. No change. For my third subject, I can have he or she or it, any of those. If I'm going to use anything like he, she, or it, and I'm going to ask you to add or to name the person or object, like in the case of the horse or in the case of Mrs. Taylor. For those, I am turning walk into walks. I have to add an S. I'm going to also shade, I'm going to shade those in with my highlighter. There's my S. So if I have a singular thing, like a horse or a person, I have to add an S to the end. In fact, let's go ahead and highlight he, she, it, or name. All right, and let's keep going. The next possible subject is we, and we walk. That also goes for my friend and I. If I have my friend and I've got I, and it becomes a we, so I'm going to use we walk. I don't have to change, I don't have to change my verb. And then my last one is they. If I'm listing multiple people, like Mrs. Taylor and Ms. Butler, or multiple things like the horses, I use they walk. I don't have to make changes. So really the only time I need to make a change is if I am talking about one person or thing, and it's not you and it's not me. Now, the next thing I want to point out is that because we're talking about English, we have some verbs that don't follow the rule. They're called irregular verbs. If you speak other languages, you might know of some irregular verbs in your own language. So we're going to highlight the word, we're going to highlight over here where it says irregular verbs. Irregular verbs are just verbs that don't follow the usual pattern. You just have to memorize them. The first irregular verb we're going to look at is the word have. It stays typical for I have. And we can even use our chart over here. I have instead of walk. You have. We have. They have. But there's one version that doesn't follow the rule. And it's when we do he, she, or it. Instead of using haves, you've never heard someone says he haves to go to school. We use the verb has. So whenever I'm using the verb have, and I'm going to use the he, she, or it version, I use the irregular verb has. So that's my first irregular verb. The second one is the verb be. This one is irregular in a lot of languages. And we see it get changed right off the bat. We don't say I be tired, we say I am. We don't say you be tired, we change it to are. You are tired. We don't say it be tired, we say it is. For we go back to are. And this one also applies if I'm talking about myself and someone else. My friend and I are tired. And then the same thing for they are. So this one's unusual in that I have a different version for the I, which is I am, a different version for you, we, and they, that's when we use are, and then a different version for the he, she, it is. And I've left a little space down here. If we encounter some other irregular present tense verbs, we can add them. Now, once you've decided whether or not you have to add an S to your verb, we also have to consider that there are some verbs that use different spelling rules. So I'm going to highlight that down here, different spelling rules. There are a couple of patterns we need to watch out for. Most of the time, we're just going to add S, but there are some circumstances in which we're going to have to add ES. So let's explore those. The verbs that end in ch, sh, ch, s, v, and o, all of those verbs are going to have to use the ending ES. So in these ones, we don't just add an S, we add an ES. And let's look at some examples below. In the word crunch, I crunch on the apple, but if I needed to change it with the S, if I look up above and I look at my chart and I say, which of these up here do I need to change it? I can see it's my he, she, it, or the name of something. I have to add an S. So for I crunch, I can leave it, but if I'm going to change it to he crunches, I don't get to just add an S. Instead, I am going to add an ES because it ends in CH. The next example is a TCH word. I'm going to highlight that, TCH. That's the verb pitch, like I pitch the ball. However, if I'm talking about a specific person, Tony, then instead of saying Tony pitched the ball, I'm going to say Tony pitches the ball. Since that verb ends in TCH, I'm going to have to add ES to the end. All right, let's look at an example of a double S verb. I have the verb pass. We pass the grocery store. But if it's just one person, my father passes the grocery store, I'm going to add an ES because that verb ended in a double S. The same goes for verbs that end in a double Z. The bees buzz outside the hive, but if I had just one, the bee buzzes outside the hive. And then the last one was new to me. It's verbs that end in O, like the verb go. You go to school. But if I want to add the S sound to the end to say she goes to school, I have to use the ES strategy. So if you're unsure when to add just S and when to add ES, you can just check out this list right here. This helps you know exactly which verbs are going to require the ES. In fact, I'm going to chunk it like that so I can remember those are my ES verbs. The next spelling pattern that we have to think about, you may have already learned. It's that when you have a verb that ends in Y, we're going to use the change the Y to an I and then add ES rule. So for example, in the verb try, I try my best. When I want to say she tries her best, I had to change my Y into an I and then add ES. You'll notice tries does not have a Y. Instead, there's an I where that used to be. The same goes with the verb carry. They carry the laundry to the living room. My brother carries the laundry to the living room. The Y has disappeared and has been replaced by an I. Now that you've got your notes taken, it's time to start practicing. The next page has some examples. We're going to do the first two together, and then I'm going to invite you to pause the video, finish the rest, and restart the video to check your work. So let's check out the directions. They say, use the given subjects and verbs to write complete sentences in the present tense. They give us a subject and a verb, and it's our job to figure out if I need to change my verb. Our first subject is Louisa, and Louisa's verb is going to be watch. So if I think about Louisa, I can go check out my chart. Louisa isn't I or you. She's here. She could be a she or it's her name. So I know I'm going to use this pattern. This is where I have to add an S to the verb. So I know that this one is going to be an S verb. So I want to add S. And then I'm going to think about my spelling rules. Is watch an irregular one I have to change? No, it's not on my irregular list. So I'm going to look at my spelling rules. I can see that watch ends in that TCH. Since watch ends in TCH, I'm going to underline that. I know that I'm not just going to add an S. I'm going to add an ES, so I can even fix that. So instead of just plus S, I'm going to add ES. That leaves me with watch is. So I can add that down here. Louisa watches. And then I can finish the sentence any way I want. Louisa watches TV. So my strategy is to think about my subject, check out my chart to decide if I need to change my verb, and if I do need to change it, then think about the spelling rules. All right, let's look at example number 2. Here I have we, that's my subject, and my verb is travel. If I look on my chart, here's we, and I can see I don't have to change the verb, so it will stay the same. My sentence is we travel, and then you can make it travel wherever you want. We travel to Mexico. So I'm going to invite you to please pause the video, try out the next two on your own, and then restart the video to check your work. Hopefully you have finished the next two and you are restarting the video to check your work. Our next subject is the students. Since it ends with an S, I can see that this is plural. Looking at my chart, that would be the same as they. It's a group of people. And my verb is follow. Since I'm using the they version, because I have multiple people, I don't have to make changes. So it's just the students follow, and I can make them follow whatever I want. The students follow me. That's all I've got space for. All right, and then the next one, the subject is the turtle, and my verb is splash. When I check out the chart over here, thinking about the turtle, it's going to be a he, she, it. The turtle is an it, and I can see that that means I'm going to add an S. When I look at the verb splash, I can check it's not in my irregular verbs, but it is down here in my spelling rules changes. It ends in a sh, which means I'm not just going to add S, I'm going to add ES. The turtle splashes at the zoo. So that's the job in that first section. The next section is asking you to make corrections. Here are the directions. Fix the errors in the sentences below. It can be an agreement error, meaning you didn't use the right version of the verb, an irregular verb error, they didn't use the right irregular verb, or a spelling error, they forgot to apply the spelling pattern. So here's our first incorrect sentence. He have a pet fish. Now, he is one person, and have, I saw over here on my irregular list. I don't get to keep it as have. The he, she, it version of have is has. So that's the error here. We need to change have into has. Our correct sentence is he has a pet fish. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can spot the errors in the other two sentences. Then restart the video and make your corrections. All right, let's check your work. The next incorrect sentence says, June and Mika carries their backpack to class. When I think about my subject, June and Mika, that is two people. And when I look at my chart, two people would be they. It's not a he, she, it is they. And I can see that my verb shouldn't change. It shouldn't have an S on the end. But here in this sentence, June and Mika carries has an S on the end. They're using the wrong verb. Instead, I want to use the word carry. I can also see that it has an IES, which means the old verb ended in a Y. Carry. So our correct sentence is June and Mika carry their backpack to class. And our final sentence, Marcus tries to fall asleep. So Marcus is one person, and our verb is tries. If I look at my chart, Marcus is a name, and it should end in that S sound. So they've done a good job of adding the S. However, when I look at that, I can see it has YS. I can see that this person forgot to use the change the Y to an I before adding ES. So if I read it out loud, it sounds correct, but it's misspelled. So we're going to fix it. Instead of tries like that, we're going to start to write the word try. Instead of writing the Y, I'm going to write an I and then ES. Our correct sentence is Marcus tries, TRIES, to fall asleep. So these are your subject-verb agreement notes. Hopefully with this practice you have a better understanding and you're ready to apply this to your own writing.